Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for January 10th, 2018, 8th year of Chungi, 11th month, and 24th day. Tim Elder and Greg Knoll here for the second king of Chanuk, Hyung Moon. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
Let's go right to the weather in the Chanuk area right now. It is 10 degrees Fahrenheit and clear, and we're expected to get up to 36 degrees today with increasing cloudiness throughout the day. And then tonight it'll only go down to 28 degrees. That's pretty warm. Tomorrow going into the upper 40s to 48 degrees. And then the day after, of course, we're going to have that big 5 in front. It's 56 degrees now is the current forecast for Friday's high, daytime high. And it's going to be raining from Friday evening until Saturday, going back. Then Saturday, Sunday, we go back down to more normal temperatures. But we have a 50-degree day coming up, it looks like, on Friday.
That's going to put a serious dent in the snow.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay, let's go to our Remas. This morning in the New Testament, I'm in John verse of chapter 21. This is the final chapter in the Gospel of John. And Jesus is basically wrapping things up here. And he has a very strange conversation with Peter. And I read just the last part, but now I want to read the whole part of it. I want to read this. This is starting with verse 15 in chapter 21. So when they had dined, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonas." Now, Jesus gave him the name Peter. Right? His original name was Simon. Jesus said, "Okay, now your name is going to be Peter." But here, rather than calling him by the name that he gave him, he's calling him by his original name that was given to him by his physical parents. "Son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these?" He saith unto him, "Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee." He saith unto him, "Feed my lambs." Now, notice that phrase, "feed my lambs." Then in the next verse, he saith to him again the second time, "Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me?" He saith unto him, "Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee." He saith unto him, "Feed my sheep." In this verse 17, he saith unto him a third time, "Simon, son of Jonas, love thou me?" Peter was grieved because he said unto him the third time, "Lovest thou me?" And he said unto him, "Lord, thou knowest all things, thou knowest that I love thee." Jesus saith unto him, "Feed my sheep." Then in 18, Jesus continues the conversation again in a strange way. "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself and walkest whither thou wouldst. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee and carry thee whither thou wouldst not." And then in verse 19, John, or the author of the Gospel, gives his own interpretation, saying that Jesus was predicting how Peter was going to die. It's interesting here that Jesus 3 times asked Peter whether he loved Jesus, whether Peter loved Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I think the desired answer, right, the model answer was pretty clear. "Yeah, Jesus, I love you." That was the answer, but Peter couldn't say that. Didn't say it or couldn't say it, or I don't know why he didn't say it, but he didn't say, "I love thee." And although it doesn't happen in John, we know that through other Gospels that Peter actually denied Jesus 3 times later on, right?
Right.
When Jesus was on trial. And then Jesus has this verse, and although the conversation is interesting, but and I'm sure you are receiving revelations right now about this verse, but I especially focus here on the last verse, 18, where he talks about where Jesus says, "Well, when you're young and full of energy, you can go where you want, but later on, when you lose that energy, when you become weak, then people will take you where you want to." And this reminded me very much of Father's situation in St. Mary's Hospital in Seoul. And some of us have seen that video that was taken of Father when he was in the emergency room in the IC unit, and he had various medical devices hooked up to him, and he couldn't. He was conscious, but he could not express himself because he had various tubes in his mouth and so forth. Where here was the God of all creation in human form, in human body, completely at the mercy of those around him, at the mercy of the Han mother, at the mercy of his children, and at the mercy of a few disciples that were there. And they were discussing whether or not to turn off the switch, turn off those devices that because at that time he could not breathe on his own. The doctors at one point said, "Was this man? Was he a coal miner or something? Because he had something similar to the disease that disease that the coal miners have, where they have coal dust in their lungs." This was never really pursued, but probably I would think that this was the effect of his work in the Hyung fertilizer factory. I would imagine. But anyway, he's in this situation. He's lying there completely at the mercy of those around him, and those around him are people that he has educated. Han mother was someone that was a woman that he had chosen, and as the woman that he would restore from Satan's lineage to become the true mother. And so he had educated and trained her for 50 years, and he had given birth to children through her. In English it sounds strange for me to say he gave birth to children, but actually, in Father's thinking and Father's thinking, that's actually correct. That the Father gives birth and the mother nurtures. This is how Father explains, because the seed, the life, comes from the Father. So he gave birth to children through her, and he had also educated them, and also the disciples or the blessed couples were also people that he had educated. But now in a time when he was completely at their mercy, and as Jesus says here, when they would gird thee and take thee whither thou wouldest not, they could take Father wherever they wanted. And if they wanted to end his life, they had that ability to end his life. And they were discussing this. This was only the second time in history that God took human form to be on earth. The first time was Jesus, and this was Father, and it would seem like anyone who had received Father's education for all those decades would understand that every minute, every second that Father could be on earth in the physical world was a huge blessing for all of humanity. And yet there was this discussion going on of possibly ending Father's time on earth through human judgment, through a time chosen by human beings, and not allowing Father to, or not allowing God to. Father was born at a time that God chose. Father was blessed or married at a time that God chose. And so it stands to reason that he should also pass or die or pass out of the spirit world, out of the physical world, also at a time that God chose. In other words, that he would choose himself, because he was God in human form. For Father was just like Jesus, completely human and completely God. Perfectly human, perfectly God. Holy human, holy God, I guess is the theological term. But just as Peter, when it came down to the end, Peter, here in John 21, doesn't understand what Jesus wants him to do. doesn't understand that Jesus wants him to say, Jesus needs him to say, needs him to set the condition of saying, yes, Jesus, I love you. Simple words, 3 words. But Peter couldn't say it because he didn't understand what Jesus was trying to do here. And he says he even became grieved. He started getting frustrated or Peter, I guess, was a man with short temper, and I guess he was getting kind of angry maybe at Jesus. How many times do we have to do this? But in the same way, fathers, the wife that he had chosen, the wife at that time, and the disciples that he had educated for decades, when the chips were down and when they were on their own, did not understand what they needed to do, or else they didn't or didn't want to understand. Han Mother definitely already, we know now that she had been preparing for years to establish her own kingdom. Queendom. Her own realm of authority. She'd been doing this for years. We know this now from testimony from people around her, that at least 3 years had gone into the preparation for this. And some of the 36 couples that were there, or the others couples that were there, the people who were in that meeting in the St. Mary's Hospital, I wasn't there, so I'm basing my what I say now on testimony of our King. Sok Junho was there. He was the president of the Junho Sok. People know him from his work in Russia. He was there. He was the president of the Korean Church at the time. Bo Hee Pak was there. Kim Young-hee, one of the 3 disciples, the only remaining 3 of the 3 disciples, remaining on earth of the 3 disciples, was there. Jae-suk Lee, maybe Westerners don't know him very well. I know him very well. He was at one time, he was president of the Korean Church. He fancies himself as something of a theologian, although he comes from a Buddhist background, studied law in college. But anyway, he was there. And of course, the king was there, and Kukjin was there. And it was only the 2 filial children who opposed the idea of turning off the life-sustaining medical devices. I think the fact that that kind of a question would come up in and of itself was very tragic and represented a betrayal of Father. If they had, they had been educated for all these years, and they couldn't understand the value of the Messiah. They couldn't understand the value of having the Messiah on earth even 1 minute longer, 1 second longer. And they used the excuse, we wanted to relieve his pain. But that is just an excuse. I'm sure they don't actually believe this excuse. So the Han Mother's motive was clear. She wanted, to get rid of him as quickly as possible. That motive is clear. He was an obstacle to her. And she was very happy, I'm sure, that she couldn't wait for him to pass. The disciples, the king often talks about psychopaths and sociopaths. The disciples, I think, were sociopaths. They could see power shifting.
Opportunist.
Yeah. They could see power shifting to the Han Mother, and so... and even though Father had clearly established his heir, his inheritor and representative body, they did not want to follow him because they did not see power shifting in his direction. Instead, they saw the power shifting in the Han Mother's direction, because she had been preparing.
Yeah, she probably
for 3
made
years.
That quite clear.
Yeah, she'd been preparing for 3 years, and also because Kukjinim had and the king had given her power. Actually, they had put half a billion dollars, $500 million under her control, and the Family Federation Mission Foundation. The Mission Foundation was created, as I understand, in the late 90s, when there was this Asian financial crisis, and a lot of the business assets of the Unification Church at that time were going bankrupt, or did go bankrupt, or went into bankruptcy. And so, for example, Tongyil Heavy Industries was lost at that time. It went into bankruptcy, and then the bankruptcy court allowed another entity to take over the assets of the Tongyil Heavy Industries. So it was completely lost to father at that time. Ilhwa also went bankrupt at that time. It was saved by basically pleading and begging with the court-appointed administrator, or what do you call it, a manager. Anyway, the court appointed an outside lawyer or somebody to manage Ilhwa while it was in bankruptcy. And when it came out of bankruptcy, the court could have done many things to it. Didn't necessarily have to return to the Unification Church or to father, but it was returned to father, and many other assets were lost at that time. And it looked like perhaps it looked like a lot of other assets might be in danger. And so a separate foundation was created to sort of carry on after the demise of the what at that time was the Unification Church assets. It turned out that both survived, all right? And under Korean law, it's kind of strange to have two nonprofit organizations for one religious body. And this was always kind of bureaucrats were always looking at this kind of what's going on here after that, I know. But anyway, that's how it came about. And the head of that mission foundation, there was this second foundation that was nonprofit organization that was formed in the late 90s, was Hak Ja-han, was the Han mother. She was the chairman of the board of that new foundation. And a lot of assets were put into that foundation with the idea that they could be saved. Now, both survived, and then so there was the Tongyil Foundation and there was the Mission Foundation. These two then survived. And when Kukjinim came to be the head of the Tongyil Foundation, he was putting assets into the Mission Foundation because that was Mother's foundation. That was her. She was controlling that foundation. She was not controlling the HSA UWC or the Tongyil Foundation, which traditionally had controlled all the business assets of the Unification Church. And the king tells us that he asked Kukjinim, are we sure we want to do this? We want to put all those assets under her control? But yeah, because and Kukjinim's explanation was that we don't want her, when father passes, we don't want her to be beholden to the Korean leaders. We want her to be able to do what she needs to do in order to follow father's direction according to her conscience. And so they trusted her, as father trusted her, put full trust in her. And so when father passed, there was about $500 million there. Now she's going hat in hand to Japan every few months, trying to collect money from the Japanese. So I don't know what happened to that $500 million. But she's, and she's been handing out money left and right. Unfortunately, and this is what I discovered after father's passing, and I guess looking back, I should have maybe discovered it earlier. But she was pretty liberal with not only buying things for herself, expensive things for herself, but also buying expensive things for other people as well. And I realize now that her feeling was that she could buy people's loyalty, I still have a suit that she bought for me. But my loyalty is a little bit more expensive than that. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world, right? Mm-hmm. So a suit ain't going to do it. Unfortunately, she turned against Father, and that $500 million, rather than being used to further Father's providence, to Father's will, was actually used in the opposite purpose. And so the king walked away, and as he has mentioned, and I think I've mentioned a couple of times, people were telling him, and people also mentioned similar things to me. Just stay quiet for a few years. She's not going to live long. If you disagree with what she's doing, just wait. Once she leaves, then you'll be in charge, and you can change everything back to where it was. People were trying to get me to say that to him. They were coming to me and say, "No, why does he make such trouble? Just tell him to be quiet for a few years." Mm-hmm. I don't understand why he's making such trouble. As soon as she's gone, he can change everything back if he doesn't disagree, and everybody will follow him. But as the king says, that means that they're telling him first to betray Father, and then when his mother passes, to betray his mother as well. This is the sociopathic mindset. This is the sociopathic mindset. Mm-hmm. You just go to wherever power is. You just go to wherever the power flows, Yeah. Of course, this is what Family Federation people are doing today. They stay in the Family Federation because that's where the money is. That's where the power is. So they stay there. And they say, "Oh, Hyung Jinim out there, in the woods of Pennsylvania, with a few." In the beginning, we were a group of disgruntled old people, right? Disgruntled old members, I think, is how we were described back in 2014 or so. Now we have, I don't know, some disgruntled young people as well. But of course, Father started in a mud hut, in a cardboard hut. That's where he started. Mm-hmm. But he had no less authority in that cardboard hut than he did later on when he was living in this huge, huge, huge palace, right? Mm-hmm. God's authority is that way. Did I get here from John 21? Where am I?
Well, thank God, the king was able to maintain the absolute standard of faithfulness to Father.
Yes.
I mean, and when we think about Abraham cutting the dove, mm-hmm. How important it is that the providential central figure maintains absolute faith, absolute love, and absolute obedience.
All humanity, past, present, and future, owes a huge debt of gratitude to the second king for that.
Yeah. So if his offering is tainted in any way, then the providence would be, suffer greatly. So, praise God.
Praise God. Are you ready to go to the Chunseongyung Rima?
Sure.
Okay. In Chunseongyung, I'm in the book on the True Family, chapter 3, and the paragraph settings are different in the English, so I'm going to just begin where the Korean begins. Let's see here. It starts I have to start in the middle of a paragraph, so it's a little bit difficult to find. Okay. Oh, well, I can't find it. All right, we'll just begin at the beginning of the English paragraph then. The same applies in a nation. With the leader of the nation at the center, all families should embrace the civilizations of East and West and civilizations of North and South and all the people of the world as their brothers and sisters, and eventually establish a family model. The model is the same for all. You yourselves are the center of that model. This model represents a principle that requires that requires that from you should come your family, which then expands to the nation world, heaven and earth, and all the way to God. You not only want to be the center of the universe, you can be the center. You can be the center. In the same way, the family is the center of the universe. Okay, yeah. Okay. If you think of heaven as the parents, then earth represents the children. When considering east and west, the east represents the man and west the woman. So after marriage, the woman goes to the place where her husband is, wherever it may be. This is similar to the west, reflecting the sunlight that shines from the east. It is the same with the relationships of brothers and sisters. When the eldest brother leads a task, the younger brothers and sisters will cooperate. Therefore, each person should be in a parent-child relationship, a conjugal relationship, and a sibling relationship. In other words, these three relationships must meet at one point. The center point is one. The centers for top and bottom, left and right, and front and back should not be different. If their centers are different, the relationships of top and bottom, left and right, and front and back will all be unbalanced. All right, that's enough. Yeah, okay. All right, so this is talking about the family as the center of the universe. And Father talks about, top, bottom, or upper, lower, depends on how you translate it, and left, right. Later on, he says, no, we have to change it right and left. So right and left, and then front and back. So he's talking about, this is the four-position foundation. And in the principle, it says that when the four-position foundation spins, then it becomes a sphere. And it's actually a three-dimensional figure. And so top and bottom is a parent and child. The horizontal relationship is the husband and wife, but it's a subject-object relationship. So it's horizontal, but it's a subject-object relationship. And then the sibling relationship, that's the front and back. So it's the front is the older, and the back is the younger. And this also is a subject-object relationship. This is the one thing that I find that I'm glad that my children went to Korean public elementary school in their early years, and also to kindergarten, because there's one thing that is taught there that is never taught in Western schools, and that is the difference between vertical relationships and horizontal relationships. And the difference is very, very important. I had a conversation with a taxi driver one time, a very relieving, I used to, when I was in the paper, sometimes I'd have to work until about 2 in the morning in order to put the paper to bed. Every day or so, different desk editors took turns putting the paper to bed at night. In other words, putting out the last edition. And so I would take a taxi home, and I would talk to the taxi driver primarily to keep him awake. Because this was just about the time that taxis were changing, the drivers were changing, right? So the guy usually at 2 a.m., this guy's been working usually 18 hours or maybe 24. Anyway, he's been working a long time. And I was always afraid he was going to fall asleep. So I would talk to him. And we got into a conversation with this one guy. And he asked me how old I am. And I told him. I've forgotten how old I was at that time, but I told him how old I was. He says, oh, that's too bad. I said, why? And I said, well, it means we can't be friends. And I thought, what? I thought this conversation was going quite well. He says we can't be friends? And he says, yeah, because you're more than 5 years older than I am. Then I understood. In Korean schools, if you ask a Korean child, who are your friends, they will list the people who are in the same class or grade. Because your friends are people who are the same age as you. Anyone who's not your same age is either an older brother, older sister, or younger brother and younger sister. They're not your friends. This is the horizontal and the vertical. See, and then they're taught that. And then, of course, in adult society, it's not just necessarily exactly the same, but it's but there's very much this similar thinking, though, that there's a difference between horizontal relationships and vertical relationships, and subject-object relationships. And this is similar to what the principle teaches, although in the principle, of course, it teaches that sibling relationships are not vertical, they are horizontal relationships, but they are subject-object relationships. And subject-object is not a vertical relationship; it's a horizontal relationship. But it's a like it says here, like the sun shining the sun shining in the east and then reflected in the west, and that kind of a situation between husband and wife. But then the relationship between parent and child is a vertical relationship. And that's different from sibling relationship. I had a traumatic experience one time when, after graduating from high school in Japan, not from a Japanese high school, but from an international school in Japan, but growing up in Japan and being inculcated with Japanese culture, with Western culture. I came back after graduating. I was going to go to university in the U.S., so I came back here to kind of acclimate myself to U.S. culture, right? So I'm staying with I'm staying in a house, on a home, and the parents in this home are friends with my parents. And I was referring to them as Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. And I remember the moment when they said, Tim, call us, what were their names? Court and Carol. And I froze. It was like I'd been hit by a bolt of lightning. Mm. I mean, these people were younger than my parents, but older than me, but they were my parents' friends, all right? Mm-hmm. They were my parents' friends. This means that, for me, they are on the same level as my parents. They're in a vertical relationship with me. To call them by their first name? And I was not in the unification church. I didn't know the principle at all. This is how I've been taught in Asian society. So I spent the rest of the summer not calling them by any name at all. Excuse me. That's how I did. I wasn't going to call them by their first name. Heaven forbid. Are you kidding me? But that is, unfortunately, my children learned English from Bart Simpson, who called his parents by their names. But even after receiving that influence from Bart Simpson, still they would not ever call me by my first name. I'm sure it would not ever even enter their mind, because they have been taught that in their. Unfortunately, the influence for them Korean culture is much stronger than the culture of Bart Simpson.
Praise God for that.
Yes. But here, the Father talks about the family being the basic unit of God's kingdom.
Yeah. The decentralized unit.
The decentralized unit, yes. Decentralized unit. And that is why in the Cheonryuk Constitution, the power is decentralized, and why all sovereignty lies with God, but then His sovereignty is represented on earth by the king of Cheonryuk, and then the king then gives that decentralizes that power, that sovereignty to all the kings and queens. And that is why it is a kingdom of kings. It is a kingdom of families that have their own king and queen. And that is why we are wearing crowns this morning.
And vertically aligned with the King of Kings.
And we are vertically aligned with the King of Kings, yes.
I never understood the King of Kings concept.
I didn't either.
Clear.
Yes. And I don't think, I always thought it was okay, you have the King of Thailand and you have the King of Saudi Arabia and then you have the King of Kings. But that's not it. Right. Because all those, I'm sorry, folks in Thailand and Saudi Arabia, all those are satanic kings. I'll get arrested in Thailand for that. I'm not going to Thailand anytime soon, I guess. Or who knows. But anyway, all those kings, how did they gain their power? Eventually they gained their power by, killing lots of people and acquiring lots of weapons and declaring themselves king. That's how.
And disarming the public.
And disarming the public. That's how these king royal lineages get started. You know, and so, but this lineage though is established by God, and it's the king because it has God's lineage. It's the central lineage of God. It's the king's lineage. Yes, and we are all aligned with that king. So with the King of Kings. Praise God.
Amazing.
Praise God. Aren't we beautiful this morning? Take it away, Greg.
No, thanks for those are interesting stories of your childhood. I think in the West we've lost that vertical alignment, and that's why.
Yeah. It used to be that way in the West too, didn't it? You would never call your father by your first name.
Well, yeah, and also your neighbors, it was Mr. and Mrs.
Right.
You know, but we have become very secularized and humanistic, and we've lost our vertical foundation as a culture. So now it is the Bart Simpson culture of disrespect. If you look at everything that's coming out in popular culture, it's very disrespectful to that vertical line. So that's something that I think the West will struggle with the idea of a king, you know, because we don't have any foundation for that. So that's something that we'll have to wrestle through. But I think based on their Judeo-Christian foundation and the way Jesus talked about the kingdom, and the second king is spending an enormous amount of time to help us understand what this new kingdom is all about and how it's different from the false kingdoms of the world.
Yeah, and he makes the point that if you're a Christian, you have to be a monarchist.
Yeah,
and
Jesus talked
maybe you
about
missed
the
it yesterday,
kingdom.
but there was in yesterday's King's Report, we went through an article in the New York Times about how there are these monarchists. You missed that, right?
Yeah, I missed
Shall we
that,
pull that up again? No, go back and watch yesterday's King's Report. But there was an article in the New York Times yesterday about monarchism and how they were talking about a descendant of Tolstoy, saying that what the United States needs is a king.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Interesting.
And making the point that monarchies, countries that have monarchies, are more stable and are often richer, et cetera, et cetera. They had some good points for monarchies.
Interesting.
Yeah. This is the New York Times.
But
then the New York Times also gave equal coverage to the other guys too, about the anti-monarchists. I forgot what they're called, but the anti-monarchists. Yeah. But that was an interesting article, and you might want to look it up if you missed that report on yesterday's King's Report. Okay. Anything else?
No.
All right. Let's go to break now, and then we'll come back and start going through the news today. Bannon is out. All right. With that tease, let's go to break.
We kind of like lost the sense of like why we were doing this, like why we were going through this, and kind of felt rushed because we only knew each other for about 2 months actually.
Only 1 month.
1 month? Yeah. Okay, 1 month before the matching ceremony we had. And so yeah, we started having a hard time. And so like for me, like, you know, you get kind of fooled by Hollywood, and I think that's where my biggest trouble was because I didn't know how to be an actual good husband at that time and how to like really work with a woman before it. So Hyun really gave me clear direction. Basically, you know, he just said like, you know, you have to be strong, you have to be, you know, confident in yourself and not be so worried about yourself. You have to be confident in who you are, kind of idea.
The more I had to wait, the more attacking was getting much more intense, and I was really struggling at the time. So, you know, And I could feel Satan was just trying to attack me, playing with my emotions, making me really complicated and confused. And it got to the point where it turned me very negative about the blessing. So, and that time I knew the way to overcome this situation was, just holding on to God and His words, because I don't think I'll be ever to overcome this situation alone. That time I really felt I really need God by my side. So I started doing conditions, prayer, and Rima. And through that, I really realized, God was really straightforward to me and just, sending these messages to me, telling me to be thankful. I realized, God really wanted this blessing to happen.
And welcome back to the King's Report for January 10th, 2018. Tim Elder and Greg Noll in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon. All right, so with the saga of Steve Bannon has now come to kind of a conclusion, I guess, more or less, with Bannon.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think he's just starting a new chapter, but I think he's going to be quite active.
But anyway,
yeah.
Steve Bannon has stepped down from Breitbart News Network. Whether he stepped down or he was pushed down, I don't know. But probably, I don't know. Anyway, my philosophy is to take people at face value or what they say until we're proven otherwise.
I think he's an honorable guy. I'm still kind of confused on what's happening.
Yeah. All this started with the Alabama election, didn't it? Mm-hmm. Where Bannon endorsed one guy and President Trump endorsed another guy. Bannon's guy won the primary. President Trump's guy lost the primary. Then they went on to up against the Democratic candidate in a very, very red state. In other words, a very strong Republican state where Republicans should have been able to win fairly easily. But eventually the Democrat won. And President Trump endorsed the Republican candidate who was originally Bannon's candidate towards the end there. But anyway, the Democrat won. And then that was sort of seen as a blow to Bannon's attempt to completely change the Republican Party inside and out, because he said that he was going to challenge a lot of Republican incumbents during the midterm election of this year. But that has gone by the wayside. President Trump is not following that at all, and he's basically saying, when he's saying that he will support the incumbents. I think in almost all cases, the Republican incumbents. So I don't know, taking this at face value. I mean, I know that he was the leaker. He was he was shopping anti-Trump material back in 2016. I know that, all that. But let's look at just at the surface of this for the time being. It does look like Bannon was an ideologue, and maybe could not stand could not work with anyone who disagreed with him in the slightest. In other words, anyone who was not going to conform to his version of orthodoxy. Orthodox, I don't know what he would call it, Bannonism or orthodox conservatism, and could not work with anyone who would not go with it. Whereas Trump is a businessman, and you guys can work with
used to working in the swamp. You work in the swamp every day.
You're a businessman, and you guys can work with almost anyone, right?
Absolutely, you have to.
You have to. And so President Trump, keeping the long-term goal in mind, but still willing to work with people even in the short term and understanding what needs to be done now in order to keep the movement alive, right? So even if between Luther Strange and Roy Moore, even if Luther Strange was a product of the establishment and loyal to the establishment, still, in his judgment, Roy Moore was not going to be able to win the election against the Democrat, which it turned out to be right. And so he endorsed Luther Strange, hoping that Luther Strange would have a better chance of defeating the Democrat, and probably would have, quite frankly, if in that Alabama Senate election, by-election, replacing Jeff Sessions. I'll bet Luther Strange probably could have won that, because it is a very strong Republican state, and unless there's really a reason why the Republican candidate should not be supported, such as pedophilia, even if it's 40 years ago, which Roy Moore was accused of, although he denied it. Unless there's that kind of a special circumstance.
Which is a whole nother story, how dangerous politics are right now, where people can make all sorts of allegations 3 weeks before an election.
Right.
And that probably was what brought him down.
Yeah.
Because it was a close race.
Yes.
Without those allegations, Moore probably would have won.
Yes. So anyway, so Bannon, that sort of put a wrench in the works for Bannon to, completely revolutionize the Republican Party. And then it's been downhill for him since then.
Yep.
And now he's, of course, even before then he had to leave the White House. But it really was the Alabama election, though, I think that really put him on a steep slope. Downward.
And it was a major
slope.
Division between him and Trump on the whole campaign. But I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think Bannon had a very hard time dealing with Trump's so-called compromising values,
Right.
working with liberals
Right.
in the D.C. swamp. And Bannon is probably a purist and has always been able to separate himself from that kind of commingling of sorts. I mean, even the creation of Breitbart is a very orthodox conservative publication.
So it'd be interesting to see what happens to Breitbart now. How will it change, or will it change? Will they be able to keep the course, or will they be changing now? We'll be watching that.
And why step down from Breitbart? I wonder.
Well, Drudge Report and Infowars were kind of warning Breitbart to get rid of Bannon. Yeah, and saying that if they didn't, then
because
they
of
would start to attack.
because of the leaks and
Yeah,
stuff.
well,
the tarnished reputation.
Tarnished reputation. Yeah. Because right now, at least, Bannon is a man on the outs, and he has very few friends right now. Yeah. He has a new billionaire supporter, apparently.
Soros?
No, Guo Wengui, who also goes by the name of was it Miles Kwok? Miles Kwok, KWOK. But he's a Chinese billionaire who is wanted by the Chinese government. He's a Jiang Zemin fan. So he's not a conservative, all right? Jiang Zemin, of course, is the president of China. It was before Xi Jinping was Hu Jintao, and then before that was Jiang Zemin. And this Miles Kwok, they're calling him now in the English press, is a fan of Jiang Zemin. So that means he's a fan of a communist murderer dictator, right? And he's supporting Bannon, or Bannon has gone to him for support. So that's another strange twist in the twist here. Really? I mean, so would Bannon go to Stalin? Would Bannon also go to Hitler for support? Would he go to? I mean, who would he not go to for support?
Interesting.
Very, very interesting. Very, very strange. They do say that politics makes strange bedfellows. This seems to be an example of that. Trump had a thing yesterday on television, but Let's go look at some of these headlines here. 7.6 earthquake in the Caribbean. Drudge has it. It's the top of his thing, but nothing really came of that. No tsunami, and no major damage is reported. Fortunately, it was only 6 miles deep, so I think that that's not very deep, as I understand, and perhaps for that reason, I don't know why. Anyway, it's no major damages anyway. Some interesting stories here. That now in the 13 dead in California floods. now that a lot of the forests have burned, there's nothing to stop the water from flowing down the hillsides, and so there's a flooding. There are walls of mud coming down. The town looks like a battlefield. And at the CES, that's the sort of the technology conference, right, in Las Vegas, snuggle robots and talking toilets. Talking toilets have been around for a long time in Japan. Listen, the Japanese have been very, very creative when it comes to toilets. We have to look into it sometime. But anyway, pole dancing droids go head-to-head with the strippers. Sounds like people are having a lot of fun there. Update, hundreds of bags underneath the JFK terminal ramp as owners wait after weekend chaos. Boy, my wife got out of there just in time, didn't she? Yeah.
Sounds like her ordeal could have been much worse.
Yes. She was 19 hours late in clearing customs, but 12 of those hours were spent at the airport of origin, and 5.5 on the tarmac. The end, Breitbart out, Bannon out at Breitbart. The legend, the myth. Now, Drudge has been warning about Breitbart for some time, actually, and people have sort of been poo-pooing that, and he's linking to an article here in the American Conservative, The Myth of Steve Bannon, the Kingmaker. History has its share of political masterminds. He's not one of them. It's the article here in American Conservative. So let's look at this. There was always a deeply contradictory thesis at the heart of the media's narrative on Steve Bannon, and Michael Wolff's controversial new book, Fire and Fury, has brought it to the fore. If the narrative was to be believed, Bannon was kingmaker, mastermind, and manipulator, and master publicist all at the same time. There's just one problem. These characteristics are antithetical if one examines the history of advisors to the powerful. Bannon, erstwhile leader of Breitbart News turned presidential advisor, was pulling the strings in the Trump White House and masterfully executing his secret alt-right agenda, so the story went. He was the great manipulator, Time proclaimed on its cover, accompanied by an article that posed the question, is Steve Bannon the second most powerful man in the world? Saturday Night Live parodied this pervasive narrative with Bannon as the Grim Reaper, maniacally manipulating Alec Baldwin's childlike Trump to do his evil bidding. Even after enduring months of Baldwin skits and Melissa McCarthy's withering mockery of former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, the portrayal of Bannon left Trump especially upset, aides reported to the Washington Post. And why wouldn't it? In the skit, Trump was, as the Post put it, relegated to a miniature desk, playing dolefully with an expandable toy. Soon enough, the president began to publicly downplay Bannon's role in his presidency, saying that Bannon had joined very late, and adding in an interview to the New York Post, I am my own strategist, and it wasn't like I was going to change strategies. Trump clearly resented the narrative that he was a puppet on Bannon's strings. Whether obsequious sycophants or strategic masterminds, kingmakers are not known for trumpeting their successes. Indeed, their power is derived from the quiet ways in which they exert their wills. As Sir Francis Bacon said, he that would keep a secret must keep it secret that he hath a secret to keep. An advisor can never publicize that he has power, because doing so risks losing the master's trust. As Queen's Counsel to Queen Elizabeth I and then Lord Chancellor to James I before he had to resign in disgrace, Bacon knew a thing or two about advising the powerful. Unlike the sly and self-deprecating ways of history's great kingmakers, Bannon was well known for his brazen interview forays into the media. His website, Breitbart, happily credited itself with every electoral victory and after Trump's win declared war on the establishment, Republicans in office. and they congratulated themselves with developing the intellectual underpinnings of Trumpism and populism, and named themselves the driving force behind Trump's agenda. In an administration that became notorious for embarrassing leaks, Bannon was reportedly behind most from the Trump White House. And as John Gibson pointed out, maybe Trump was behind the others, because he was always on the telephone with his friends. Contrast that with Charles, his French names again, a statesman and diplomat who worked under the regime of French King Louis XVI, survived the upheaval of the French Revolution, and then devoted himself to Napoleon I, Louis XVIII, Charles X, and Louis Philippe. Talleyrand was known for his distinctive realist brand of cynical diplomacy. His ability to survive at the highest levels of successive French governments with competing agendas is cited as a model for advisors. He switched sides so many times that a contemporary cartoon shows him with 6 different faces, one for each regime he served. The first of all qualities in life is the art of showing only a part of oneself, of one's thoughts, one's feelings, one's impressions, Talleyrand wrote in his memoirs, adding that man was given the power of speech to conceal his thoughts. Indeed, the ability to discuss one's true self, to disguise one's true self, is a common theme embodied by history's most successful and powerful advisors. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, a clever chameleon and the quintessential kingmaker, reshaped the Middle East while being everything to everyone and nothing to himself. He wrote, "In my case, the effort for these years," let's skip that. "Bannon was never capable of this kind of self-erasure. He may have imagined himself in the role of the same Talleyrand who said, 'They think that I am immoral and Machiavellian, yet I am simply impassive and disdainful. I have never given perverse advice to a government or a prince, but I do not go down with them.' But that isn't what Bannon ultimately did. His actions betray not a mastermind or a power behind the throne, but a ship without a harbor, having alienated every port in the game of politics. Even his original backers, the billionaire Mercer family, have reportedly abandoned him in the aftermath of Wolf's devastating book, and Breitbart may force him out next, which they did last night. After he was jettisoned from the Trump administration last summer, Bannon claimed he had resigned, although the White House said he had been fired. The author of Fire and Fury, Mike Wolf, isn't a credible journalist, and the revelations in his book may or may not be accurate. It's impossible to know. Certainly, the furious response from the White House denouncing Bannon suggests there may at least be some truth to Wolf's account. Whatever the case, Bannon, the ship adrift, now says he regrets his comments, some of which were deeply negative against Trump kin Donald Jr. and Javanka, his nickname for Jared and Ivanka Kushner. The truth is that Bannon was never the mastermind he was given credit for. As a skillful publicist, he played up and perpetuated the mythology about him, which conveniently fed the media's confirmation bias. But as a sloppy and narcissistic advisor, his downfall was probably only a matter of time.
Well, that's what Trump called him, Sloppy Steve.
That's right, yeah.
So
it's interesting that when Trump was first inaugurated, I can't remember who, maybe it was more than one person was saying that, oh, don't worry, Trump will do something within the first 6 months to get himself impeached. Well, it's been 12 months now, and he's still in the White House. So Trump, but Bannon actually, though, got himself impeached basically. So it was not Trump that got himself impeached, it was Bannon that did that. That's what I get from this. So maybe I think we'll see a lot more articles on this situation. I guess Henry Kissinger has been an advisor to many different presidents. He was Secretary of State, I guess, under Nixon, and he negotiated the end to the Vietnam War in Paris. But he's advised not only U.S. presidents but other world leaders as well. And probably he takes after this statement by Talleyrand, where it says you be anybody to him. He can be, depending on who you're advising, he could probably advise the king. I'll bet Kissinger could. I mean, he could take on that face of being loyal to the second king, you know, and then he can go back and he can advise the Bilderberg group. And
consultant in the business world, that would be a consultant.
Consultant, all right.
But there is no soul.
There is no soul.
Yeah.
But that's also the danger of people who rely on advisors, because you got to understand that these people are not your supporters; they're just your advisors. There's a difference.
Yeah.
So Bannon is apparently Bannon is out. It'd
be interesting to see where he shows up next, if he's going to lay low for a while and then go on a speaking tour. He's the kind of person that might go on a speaking tour.
To go on a speaking tour, you have to have audiences. And I think he's kind of burned some bridges in that audience way. Yeah. You know, I mean, he was in Tokyo recently, you know, and some of our sanctuary people were there. Because Bannon was bringing together the conservatives of Japan.
Right.
And even some of our sanctuary people in Korea went to attend that event in Tokyo.
So do you think he's lost his conservative base?
Absolutely. Yeah. With that, I mean, if that book by Wolf accomplished one thing, I think it put the nails in the coffin of Steve Bannon. Yeah. I doubt that it's going to bring down Trump. But it certainly finished the job of bringing down Bannon. Well,
unfortunately, it adds a lot of credibility to Wolf's book. If this is true, then people could easily assume that other parts of the book are true.
It'll pass. That too shall pass. I don't too much worry about it because, you know, Wolf's credibility as a journalist, for one thing, is not very high, even among liberals. You know. If Woodward and Bernstein had written that book, that would be one thing, because they have credibility among the liberals. But Wolf doesn't have that kind of credibility. Meanwhile, I want to go to another kind of a surprising twist. President Trump is going to Davos.
Yes, that's big news.
That is strange news. That is, you know,
not unheard of.
Well, you know, Nixon went to China. Nixon went to China. So I suppose that
Bill Clinton went to Davos.
Wow, of course, Bill Clinton. He's a product of Davos. He's a child of Davos. So he went there, you know, to say
network.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So of course Clinton would go to Davos. Let's go to the Guardian, a British paper. See what they have to say about this.
I think it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be the sovereignty message versus the globalist message, and of course, Trump will get a huge amount of press coverage. So I think it's a providential kind of happening.
We'll see. Yes, we'll see. The president will attend the World Economic Forum after his campaign disparaged the elite annual meeting of billionaires, businessmen, and politicians. Donald Trump is set to attend the World Economic Forum in Davos, the elite annual meeting of billionaires, businessmen, and politicians. Sitting presidents have rarely attended the event, held at a ski resort in the Swiss mountains, fearing its reputation for elitism may not play well politically at home. Well, I think, you know, Trump has established himself pretty well, so he doesn't have to worry about that. Davos was once held up by the Trump campaign as an example of what is wrong with Hillary Clinton's Democratic Party. The working men and women in the world were, quote, tired of being dictated to by what we call the party of Davos, unquote, Trump's former strategist Steve Bannon declared before the election. And I think that still applies. You know, there still is a party of Davos, and Steve Bannon may have coined the term, but I think it is still an appropriate term that we can continue to use, because we have the Bilderberg. Next thing you know, he'll be going to Bilderberg. You have this party of Davos, and this party of Davos is sort of the billionaires and the it's originally designed for academics apparently, but billionaires and other people also go there because it's kind of a networking opportunity.
Yeah. Well, one of my first memories when I first came here to Bible study with the king and around the kitchen, they were on the kitchen island there, having long discussions with Kukchinim and Youngjinim. Cooksham said like 3 or 4 years ago that there needs to be a George Washington, somebody who's part of the elite class, rising up and then separating from the elite class and then representing God's providence. And that's what George Washington was part of the elite class, but he chose a different path, guided by God. And I would say Trump is that man. We had no idea at the time who it was going to be, but somehow this billionaire, blue-collar billionaire, as the king likes to call him, emerged. And now he has these connections with the Davos groups, the networking people.
And he can go there. Yeah.
Huh?
He can go there. I mean, you and I can't go there. Right. They're not going to let us in.
Right.
And he can go there.
But I think this is playing right into the hands of part of the kingdom building.
You think? Yeah, certainly. Now Trump is set to become the first sitting president since Bill Clinton to attend the conference, which takes place at the end of January. Actually, I think it's 23rd to 26th, as I looked it up.
Well, interesting, isn't it? Right at the same time as right after the Switzerland conference that the king will be at, talking about sovereignty and gun ownership.
I doubt that they will meet.
But it's interesting, the micro preceding the macro.
In a statement, Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, said, "Not what I mean is that the king has other appointments, other events scheduled. Right. He doesn't have time to meet the president."
Right. Yeah. That's right.
So if Trump asks, maybe, but I don't know.
You have to meet him in a bunker.
You have to. Yeah. In a statement, Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, said, "The president welcomes opportunities to advance his America First agenda with world leaders. At this year's World Economic Forum, the president looks forward to promoting his policies to strengthen American businesses, American industries, and American workers." What does worry me, though, is that last year, Chinese President Xi Jinping was at Davos. Yeah. And basically, he was given the stage, and he was sort of held up as the new, I don't want to say model, but sort of almost new model, for world governance.
Right.
Order before freedom. And that's basically the philosophy of the Chinese and, of course, the Communist Party and dictators elsewhere, too.
Right.
Order before freedom.
Right.
In fact, order before freedom.
Peaceful slavery.
Yes, peaceful slavery. Pax Romana. Yeah. So I'm concerned that there will be, and I'm sure the media will, they'll be comparing Trump to Xi Jinping.
Yes.
Oh, Xi Jinping was such a wonderful speaker.
Right.
Trump, he's a terrible speaker. Xi Jinping knew which fork to use. Trump, they'll be saying that. Mm-hmm. Just watch.
And climate change will be a big topic. I'm sure.
Yes. Last year, we'll talk about climate change. I mean, Trump is going to change the climate at Davos, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I'm glad he's going there to shake it up.
Last year, President Xi Jinping became the first Chinese leader to address the conference, arguing for the protection of free trade at a time when the Trump administration was pledging to erect more trade barriers. See, already they're doing it. Mm-hmm. They're contrasting Xi Jinping's liberalism, globalism with Trump's narrow-minded
nationalism.
Yes, xenophobia.
I wonder if they'll snub Trump. Maybe they won't give him a platform to speak.
Well, it'd be interesting. That's what they do. This year, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will make the first speech at the event by an Indian leader. Clinton first attended the event in 2000, the forum's 30th anniversary. Neither George W. Bush nor Barack Obama visited the conference. Ronald Reagan appeared several times via video link. Among this year's speakers are Trump's chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn, former Democratic Vice President Joe Biden, former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, and Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg.
So they have the speakers all laid out.
Yeah, well,
at this point.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
These conferences, they're
year
not like us. They plan years in advance.
That's no fun.
Bloomberg asked, "What will Trump find in Davos?" This looks like it could be an interesting article. No U.S. president has attended the Alpine Confab in almost 2 decades. Trump's reception could be as chilly as the weather. The White House stunned the political and business worlds yesterday by announcing that President Donald Trump will attend the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, later this month. the first time since Bill Clinton. Yeah, we know that. Okay, we know about the elites. Here's a rundown of some of the big questions surrounding his trip. Okay, what sort of reception, or let me see here. What's the first question? Who else will be there? The WEF hasn't yet released the guest list, but if past years are any guide, the event will attract a who's who of business. Okay, all right.
Wonder if any of the Saudi princes will be there.
What sort of reception will Trump receive? It's hard to say. On the one hand, Trump's anti-trade and immigration policies are unpopular among the bulk of the Davos set, who tend to share an easy cosmopolitanism, whatever their individual political orientations. On the other, the single unifying characteristic of WEF attendees is wealth. And with stock prices reaching record highs, many will be feeling better than usual about their personal prospects. That's doubly true for those who will benefit from the tax legislation that Trump signed in December, which provides ample new opportunities for the 0.01%.
There's one thing about business people. They put politics aside when there's money to be made. And there's a lot of money to be made in America right now. It's the most stable economy in the world and rising economy.
Yes.
So let's be real.
Okay.
They may have a problem with Trumpism, but they love money.
Okay. These are not Antifa. All right.
That's right.
And then there's
They'll be making plenty of deals with Trump.
And then there's the simple issue of power, unpopular and embattled though he may be. He's not all that unpopular, actually. Trump is still the leader of the world's most important economic and military power, and many business people have a lot to lose by getting on his bad side. This is what you were saying. What does this mean for the WEF? Having Trump fly in is unquestionably a coup for the Geneva-based organization that runs the forum. Over its 4-decade history, the WEF and its founder, Klaus Schwab, have repeatedly fended off allegations that the event is an irrelevant talking shop. Last year's forum, which coincided with Trump's inauguration, felt particularly removed from global politics. Everyone's attention was riveted by developments in Washington, where the real decisions were being made. But while Trump's attendance brings the spotlight, it also upends a year of work by staffers who organized the jam-packed schedule of panels, speeches, and workshops for attendees, featuring everyone from Facebook Inc.'s Sheryl Sandberg to celebrities like Bono and Matt Damon. It also could bring back the protesters who've largely given the event a pass in recent years. Whatever Trump's specific itinerary, it's a near certainty his presence will overshadow the program. Well, no problem. Just cancel Matt Damon. What's the problem here? Bono, too, if you want.
Sounds like every organization gets taken over by the left.
Yeah.
Even a business meeting.
Yes. All right. Then they ask, why don't U.S. presidents attend more often? Well, I don't think we need to know that. It's because of the elitism. We know that. Yeah. So then that is the news then about Trump attending the Davos World Economic Forum, the hotbed of elitism in the Swiss Alps. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back with more exciting news from a Chunuk perspective.
There was a lot of things I really liked about Diala from the very beginning. You know, I loved her passion, the way she sang to the church, the loyalty she had to her parents, and you know, I really wanted somebody who's loyal to True Father, and I knew if she's loyal to her parents, that's a good sign. And the one memory I really have, it really helped me really decide I really want to get blessed to her, was she said that I'd always be second. And she'd always put God before me, and I knew if she was willing to put God before me, I could like fully trust her, and that was something that really moved me to I knew at that point I wanted to get blessed to her.
Okay, so at first when we met, we completely put each other in boxes. the famous box. And I don't know, I was praying and praying and praying, and I was just not sure in the beginning. We both weren't, and but we just continued talking, and but for some reason it just didn't seem to work, because we were just too focused on ourselves, I think. So, but I kept praying and praying, and then one day I was very frustrated, and I even talked with my mom, and she told me, you know what, Dayala, I can see he really loves God. And if he loves God, he can fully love you. And I think that's what I needed to hear, and from that moment on, everything changed.
Welcome back to the King's Report for January 10th, 2018. Yes, the year has changed. It's 2018 now. And this is Tim Elder and Greg Nolan in for the second King of Chanuk, Hyung Jin Moon. And I was just looking at a story that came across on Bloomberg just a half hour or so ago, that China may stop purchasing U.S. treasuries. That would be, a big. That could be a big thing, and it could be another step in China's challenge to the United States. They've taken other steps before, which we've covered here, such as purchasing oil in their own currency, and then having a gold futures market where people can then go and buy gold with that. And this could be another step.
That's the dirty little secret, that the American economy is held up by Chinese investment to a large extent.
Let's look at what this article says on Bloomberg. China added to bond investors' jitters on Wednesday as traders braced for what they feared could be the end of a 3-decade bull market. Officials in Beijing reviewing the nation's foreign exchange holdings have recommended slowing or halting purchases of U.S. treasuries, according to people familiar with the matter. Benchmark bonds reversed earlier gains on the news, with the yield on 10-year treasuries climbing for a fifth day. So if the yield goes up, that means the price is going down. And if the yield goes up, that means that the interest rate is going up. So that means that U.S. government has to pay that much more in interest. China's foreign exchange reserves of $3.1 trillion are the world's largest, though it wasn't clear whether the recommendations have been adopted. The market for U.S. government bonds is becoming less attractive relative to other assets, and trade tensions with the U.S. may provide a reason to slow or stop buying American debt. The thinking of these officials go, according to the people who asked not to be named, as they weren't allowed to discuss the matter publicly. China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange didn't immediately reply to a fax-seeking comment on the matter. Quote, with markets already dealing with supply indigestion, headlines regarding potentially lower Chinese demand for treasuries are renewing bearish dynamics, unquote, said Michael Leister, a strategist at Commerzbank AG. Today's headlines will underscore concerns that the fading global quantitative easing bid will trigger lasting upside pressure on developed market yields. So this means that things are going well right now, right? Unemployment is down, stock market is up, everything is going well.
Bubbles are getting bigger.
But now this is a bubble. That's looks like it. If they're saying that if there's less demand for U.S. treasuries, that means the U.S. will have to offer a higher interest rate for the treasuries that do get sold in order to attract demand, and that means that interest rates will be going up for all of us. So this could bring an end to the wonderful economy that we're currently enjoying. Not this one thing, but that whole trend of higher interest rates.
And that's in China's interest, I'm sure.
Well, China, though, they're still holding a lot of U.S. debt. All right, and so they do have a vested interest in being able to collect on that, on that debt. So I think that's pretty much all that we need to know from a layman's perspective. They have other things going on here, but China. But I think it's also not just about trade. Bloomberg's trying to make it out to be something like a reaction to stuff that Trump has done that they don't like and stuff like that. But no, I think it's part of China's long-term strategy to overtake the United States as the most powerful country in the world in the next few decades. Xi Jinping laid out that plan already in October at the 19th Party Congress, that is held every 5 years. And of course, in China, the Communist Party is in charge of everything, including foreign exchange. And so this will be whether they accept those recommendations or not will be decided according to the Communist Party's strategy. Okay, I want to. You were talking about some articles that you wanted to look at. I'd like to look at some of the DACA articles. White House said DACA is not an amnesty, they say. And you were pointing out that Trump, being a businessman, may be using DACA as kind of a bargaining chip to get the wall. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think the wall is one of his major, I would say, top 5 campaign promises. And the key to Trump's immigration policy is to restore law and order to the immigration process. And is it really fair to punish children who came in here illegally? I think most Americans would say no. It's not really fair to those kids, and give them a chance to be legal citizens. But let's stop the illegal immigration going forward. With
if not being legal citizens, at least to be able to stay.
Yeah,
they don't have to stay. They don't have to be citizens in order to stay.
Right. But there should be a pathway for them to become legal citizens, because they were born here oftentimes, or coming here.
Well, if they're born here, they're already U.S.
They're already
citizens.
Legal citizens. But if they come here as children, it was their parents' decision. Shouldn't necessarily punish the children for that. So I think Trump is using this as a bargaining chip to build the wall. I think the wall is critical.
But it's always keep in mind the many people who are standing in line for years and years, trying to get here legally. I think we always have to keep them in mind. So to be fair, and I think chain immigration has to be off the table. That's my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah.
800,000 though is part of the DACA, right?
That's what we're told.
Yes, the number.
I don't know if anyone has actually counted noses, but
right. Right, but it's that's a significant part of the workforce right now. So those kids have grown up; they're part of the workforce in many cases. I think it makes sense to keep them here under some status, whether it be green card or process to legal immigration, and build the wall.
Before we go off, because it's already 8 o'clock, but I just want to point out that yesterday the administration also ended the temporary protected status of 200,000 El Salvadorans. In 2001, when there was a large earthquake or a couple of earthquakes in El Salvador, people were allowed to come to the United States at that time, and they were given, and also people who were in the El Salvadorans who were in the United States were given temporary protected status. Temporary since 2001.
16 years later.
Yes. And the Trump administration chose not to renew that yesterday. And so now people are asking what's going to happen to those 200,000 people. And most likely, most of them will go into the underground
economy,
system, into the underground economy, yes. Because El Salvador cannot probably absorb 200,000 people.
It's not safe down there either.
It's not safe. It has one of the highest murder rates in the world. We were talking about murder rates in the world. El Salvador is up there.
Right up there.
It's not the U.S., but El Salvador is up there. Well, give them guns. Go back. Give them.
Yeah, right now the gangs only have guns.
Yes.
The normal citizens do not have.
Send them back with AR-15s. Yeah. I don't know. But so that is, we have these temporary protected status people also. So it really drives home the fact that the United States has really given of itself a great deal over the years. You know, if your house is on fire, come and stay at my house.
Right.
But after 17 years,
you got to move
crying out loud, get your own house.
You can't just be opening up my fridge and eating my food.
Which is We have experience with that too. Anyway, it's time for us to stop here. We've had a lot of fun today. And we want to thank you for joining us this Wednesday, January 10th, 2018. And the King will be giving the Korean service later on this morning. And he'll be joining you again tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. So please tune in for that, 5 to 8 a.m. again tomorrow, with, I'm sure, an exciting guest, I expect. Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Godspeed. God bless. And may his kingdom come.
Adieu.